My name is Michele Bachmann. I'm a proud member of the United States Congress. I'm privileged to serve on the House Select Committee on Intelligence. My father honorably served in the United States Air Force, my stepfather in the United States Army, and my brother in the United States Navy. I think for every one of us who are here on this stage tonight, I think we all want to send our very best happy Thanksgiving greetings to all of our men and women in uniform who are serving us overseas, here in the United States, and also to their families. Happy Thanksgiving. We appreciate, we love you, and we want to get you home as soon as we can.
Congresswoman Bachmann, let me bring you into this conversation. Are you with Congressman Paul or Speaker Gingrich, or you have your own view?
Well, I'm with the American people, with the Constitution, and with the job of the Commander-in-Chief as the #1 duty of the President of the United States. We have to realize we're in a very different war, with very different techniques that are used for that war, and very different bad actors than we've had before in the terrorists, and their motivations are very different. We can't forget that technology is completely different. When we were looking at prior laws, phones were wired into walls. That's not how it works anymore. Today we deal with wireless functions, and we have to completely change the way that we go about investigating. This is one thing we know about Barack Obama. He has essentially handed over our interrogation of terrorists to the ACLU. He's outsourced it to them. Our CIA has no ability to have any form of interrogation for terrorists. When the bomber, or the attempted bomber over Detroit, the underwear bomber, was intercepted, he was given Miranda warnings within 45 minutes. He was not an American citizen. We don't give Miranda warnings to terrorists, and we don't read them their rights.
Governor
they don't have rights.
Well, do you think, as Governor Perry has said, that Pakistan should no longer receive U.S. aid because they've shown they're not a good friend, ally of the United States?
Pakistan has been the epicenter of dealing with terrorism. They are, as Governor Huntsman said, there are al-Qaeda training grounds there. There's also the Haqqani network that can be trained there as well. And they also are one of the most violent, unstable nations that there is. We have to recognize that 15 of the sites, nuclear sites, are available or are potentially penetrable by jihadists. 6 attempts have already been made on nuclear sites. This is more than an existential threat. We have to take this very seriously. The United States has to be engaged. It is complicated. We have to recognize that the Chinese are doing everything that they can to be an influential party in Pakistan. We don't want to lose influence. I'm answering your question. You asked me about the money that the United States gives to Pakistan. This is a dual answer. A nation that lies, that does everything possibly that you could imagine wrong. At the same time, they do share intelligence data with us regarding al-Qaeda. We need to demand more. The money that we are sending right now is primarily intelligence money to Pakistan. It is helping the United States. Whatever our action is, it must ultimately be about helping the United States and our sovereignty, our safety, and our security.
You would continue that aid to Pakistan?
At this point, I would continue that aid, but I do think that the Obama policy of keeping your fingers crossed is not working in Pakistan. And I also think that Pakistan is a nation that it's kind of like too nuclear to fail. And so we've got to make sure that we take that threat very seriously.
Congresswoman Bachmann?
Well, with all due respect to the governor, I think that's highly naive because, again, we have to recognize what's happening on the ground. These are nuclear weapons all across this nation, and potentially al-Qaeda could get a hold of these weapons. These weapons could find their way out of Pakistan into New York City or into Washington, D.C., and a nuclear weapon could be set off in this city. That's how serious this is. We have to maintain an American presence. They certainly aren't looking out for the best interests of the United States. I wouldn't expect them to. But at the same time, we have to have our interest, which is national security, represented. The best way we can do that with an uneven actor state is to have some sort of presence there. I agree with all of that, and energy independence is something that President Obama certainly has avoided.
But that's going to take many years.
It will, but the president, almost every decision that the president has made since he came in has been one to put the United States in a position of unilateral disarmament, including the most recent decision he made to cancel the Keystone Pipeline. That would have not only created jobs, but it would have helped us in energy independence. But I want to go back to something. That's the fact. Why is it that we're talking about Israel having to make a strike against Iran? It's because Iran has announced they plan to strike Israel. They've stated as recently as August, just before President Ahmadinejad came to the UN General Assembly, he said that he wanted to eradicate Israel from the face of the earth. He has said that if he has a nuclear weapon, he will use it to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. He will use it against the United States of America. This isn't just an idle threat. This is a reality, and that's why President Obama has failed the American people, because for 2.5 years, he gave Iran the luxury of time. He met with them with no preconditions. It's the doctrine of appeasement. He has changed the course of history, because at the time when we needed a leader most, we didn't have one. That's what I'll do differently as President of the United States. I'll leave.
Let's talk about that, Congresswoman Bachmann. The Social Security, Medicare, health care. What would you cut first? What would you tackle if you were President of the United States?
Well, let me answer that in the context of the super committee, because I was involved in the middle of that fight as a member of Congress this summer, and my voice said this. I said it's time for us to draw a line in the sand. We had sufficient revenues coming in to pay the interest on the debt, but the real issue was, were we going to give Congress another $2.4 billion in borrowing authority? In other words, another blank check to the president. Because again, consider the context. A little over 4 years ago, we were just over $8 trillion in debt. We are now $15 trillion in debt in just over 4 years. Now we're talking about, if the gentleman is correct, adding another $11 trillion in debt over 10 years, or potentially $8.5 trillion, according to the super committee. All that they were asked to do is cut back on $1.2 trillion of that increase in debt. We aren't even talking about the central issue, which is balancing the budget. We need to balance the budget and then chip away at the debt. This isn't monopoly money, because what we need to recognize is that when we are sending interest money over to China, with whom we are highly in hoc, we're not just sending our money, we're sending our power. What will happen is that our national security and our military will decrease, and our money will increase China's military. So think about that. Our money will be used to grow China's military at the expense of the United States military. That should give every American pause.
Congresswoman Bachmann, you agree with the Speaker?
Well, I don't agree that you would make 11 million workers legal, because that, in effect, is amnesty. And I also don't agree that you would give the DREAM Act on a federal level. And those are two things that I believe that the Speaker had been for, and he can speak for himself. But those are two areas that I don't agree with. What I do think, though, is what Steve Jobs said to President Obama. He had said to President Obama that he had to move a great deal of his operation over to China because he couldn't find 30,000 engineers to be able to do the work that needed to be done. That's what we want to do. We do want to have people, and I agree with the Speaker, people like chemists and engineers and people who are highly skilled. We think about the United States and what's in the best interest of the United States. If we can utilize these workers like Steve Jobs wanted to, then we need to offer those visas. That will help the United States. But I don't agree that we should make 11 million workers who are here illegally legal. If I understood correctly, I think the Speaker just said that that would make 11 million people who are here illegally now legal. That's really the issue that we're dealing with. And also, it would be the DREAM Act, the federal DREAM Act, which would offer taxpayer-subsidized benefits to illegal aliens. We need to move away from magnets, not offer more.
During the 2000 presidential debates, Governor George W. Bush was never asked about the threat from al-Qaeda, yet the battle with al-Qaeda dominated his presidency. What national security issue do you worry about that nobody is asking about, either here or in any of the debates so far?
Congresswoman?
Well, I would agree with what my colleagues said up here on the stage, and also we need to remember we won the peace in Iraq. And now President Obama is intentionally choosing to give that peace away. This is a significant issue because we're taking the terrorist threat away from the Middle East, bringing it to the United States. We talked about al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is real. In my home state of Minnesota, we've just had 2 convictions of 2 women that are financing terror with al-Shabaab. This threat, I believe, now is in the United States. And now the threat has come home, and that's what we have to deal with.